This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Hello again and welcome to the broadcast. A powerful scene at the Vatican today as the faithful gather to say farewell to the late Pope Francis I. His body now lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica. 14 pallbearers carried the wooden casket in a solemn procession that included priests, cardinals, friars, and members of the Swiss Guard. This while a male choir chanted psalms in Latin.
Dominus vobiscum.
There will be 3 days of public viewing until Saturday's papal funeral. More from NBC's Tom Yamas.
The lines behind me here in St. Peter's Square stretch through Vatican City into Rome. People waiting hours and hours, a sea of humanity. Rows and rows of Catholics waiting patiently to say goodbye to Pope Francis.
Vice President J.D. Vance was one of the last people to see the Pope alive. He had a private audience with him on Easter Sunday, just hours before his death.
I knew he was very ill. I didn't realize how sick he was. The thing that I will always remember Pope Francis for is that he was a great pastor. People on the margins, poor people, people suffering from diseases, they saw in Pope Francis an advocate and I think a true expression of Christian love.
Francis will be the first pope in 120 years to be interred outside of Vatican City. His final resting place is a Catholic holy site 2 miles east of the Vatican. President Trump's mass deportation raids have resulted in a 650% spike in terror arrests. The Department of Homeland Security says they've arrested 200 known or suspected terrorists since January. Border Czar Tom Homan says migrant gangs have been put on notice.
The Trump administration is committed to removing every single member of TDA and MS-13 from this country.
In New York City recently, 27 members of the notorious Tren de Aragua gang were busted on sex trafficking, smuggling, and murder charges.
Why were these folks allowed to stay in this country this long? What has been going on that has allowed lawlessness?
Joe Saladino is the town supervisor for Oyster Bay, New York on Long Island. Fleeing the flames, a massive wildfire in Ocean County, New Jersey has chased thousands from their homes. That blaze forced closure of a 17-mile stretch of the busy Garden State Parkway. Danny Johnston lives in Toms River, New Jersey.
Surprising is that it's been raining a lot for the last month. So where this came from, I think it took a lot of people by surprise.
Nearly 10,000 acres have been lost to the flames with about 10% containment thus far.
This really exploded very quickly yesterday. Conditions are dry across really the entire up and down the East Coast right now. And we're also talking about really windy conditions. It's been a really windy spring. That is another part of this story that has allowed this to spread so quickly.
Fox Weather meteorologist Adam Klotz. Elon Musk says he'll soon be spending a lot less time at Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's because he's spending more time at Tesla, the electric car company he owns. Tesla earnings are down significantly from the start of the year as protesters set fire to dealerships and vandalize vehicles. Musk says starting in May, he will be less hands-on at the White House and more hands-on at Tesla. The artificial dyes used in snacks like Cheetos and Skittles are going away. The FDA is phasing out synthetic additives by the end of next year. FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary.
We are simply asking American food companies to replace petroleum-based food dyes with natural ingredients for American children, just as they already do for children in other countries.
These food dyes give candy, sports drinks, and chips their bright color. Makary says American kids have been living in a toxic soup of synthetic chemicals the past 50 years. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments yesterday in a case pitting parents against the Montgomery County, Maryland School District. At issue is why parents there were not allowed to opt their children out of LGBTQ-themed curriculum. curriculum. Former federal prosecutor Andrew Cherkasky.
This school district in Maryland, they allow for students to opt out of things like the dissection of a frog, but you can't opt your children out of literature in kindergarten regarding transgenderism, any of these sexually based topics.
Legal analyst Jen Crawford says based on Tuesday's testimony, things look pretty good for the parents in this case.
Justices were clearly sympathetic to their parents. The justices suggested that perhaps the best solution was that opt-out, where their children could kind of leave the classroom. School districts have allowed these opt-outs before, and I think based on their questions, these justices are going to require it here.
Expect a decision from the High Court sometime in June. AI at the movies? Reporter Deborah Rodriguez.
I'd put you where you are today.
Robert De Niro acknowledged AI helped alter his voice in The Alto Nights, and it enhanced Adrian Brody's Hungarian accent for his Oscar-winning performance in The Brutalist.
People here, they do not want us here.
Now, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences says artificial intelligence will not disqualify a movie from Oscar consideration, but it will favor films with more human involvement.
Deborah Rodriguez in Hollywood. Happy birthday to you two.
All right, so here we are in front of the elephants.
20 years ago today, the first video was uploaded showing YouTube's founders in front of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo. The rest, they say, is history. Tech analyst Ian Shure.
YouTube is a cultural force unlike almost anything else. It has reach that is far larger than most of us can ever really imagine.
The first clip on the site, Me at the Zoo, was filmed by YouTube co-founder Jawed Karim and his two former PayPal pals. Originally, YouTube was intended to serve as a dating website with the slogan, tune in, hook up. At first, it struggled to attract any users. Today, more than 122 million people use YouTube on a daily basis. Still to come on the Noon Report, Yogurt Factory in Rome, New York, recruiting volunteer firefighters, and the Pennsylvania county that will pay you to move there.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. We've got a winner of a Wednesday underway weather-wise across the area. But what about the rest of the week? We'll have forecast details up in 10.
All right, Kevin, we'll check back then. Thank you very much. Let's check the stories making news where you live, all across New York and Pennsylvania. Chobani Yogurt's building a $1.2 billion factory in Rome, New York. The project will bring 1,000 new and good-paying jobs to the Mohawk Valley. Governor Kathy Hochul was at Tuesday's groundbreaking ceremony.
This is the state where it's happening. Manufacturing is back. Optimism is back. Jobs are up. There is a feeling of energy like we've never seen before.
The historic investment will provide an economic shot in the arm to New York's struggling dairy farmers. Dairy farmer David Curtin attended yesterday's ceremony.
Our farm and many others in the region will look to this as an opportunity to grow as well. This is a signal to us that the future of dairy is here, and that it is strong.
The nearly 1.5 million square foot dairy processing plant marks the biggest investment in natural food manufacturing in U.S. history. Rome Mayor Jeffrey Lanigan.
What an incredible day. It's a day for all of us, the city, the county, the state, and the country. On behalf of the city of Rome, I officially welcome Chobani to our community.
The Chobani Yogurt Factory is being built at the Griffiths Business and Technology Park in Rome. It will process up to 12 million pounds of milk every day, once fully operational in a couple of years. The Pennsylvania Governor's Mansion in Harrisburg reopened for the first time yesterday since that arson attack a week and a half ago. Governor Shapiro and his family hosted the annual Easter egg hunt there. The governor telling reporters,
I'm not going to live in fear, period. And I'm looking forward to getting back here. I'm very comfortable here. I'm grateful for the honor the people of Pennsylvania have given me and Lori and our kids to live here. And we consider it our responsibility as temporary stewards of this wonderful home to not just live here, but to welcome people here.
The Shapiro family still is yet to resume living in the mansion following that fire April 13th. The governor did say he looks forward to reopening that residence to the public by next month. In Buffalo, New York, a judge has denied a plea against the death penalty in the Tops Supermarket massacre case. We get the latest from Family Life's Dee Haley in our Buffalo newsroom.
A federal judge has upheld
upheld the possibility of the death penalty in Peyton Gendron's federal case by denying a key motion from the man convicted in the racially motivated mass shooting at Tops Market on Jefferson Avenue in Buffalo. Gendron's attorneys reportedly did not want the death penalty as an option, claiming that prosecutors allegedly abused the grand jury process. That's according to the motion filed in federal court. Gendron is currently serving a life sentence without the chance of parole on state charges. As the federal case continues, the death penalty remains a possibility. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
A former coach in the Brockport, New York school district is going to jail for the next 6 months and must register as a sex offender. Ann Collins had sexual contact with a 15-year-old girl on 5 different occasions between March and August of 2018. Collins worked as the JV basketball and softball coach in the Brockport district between 2017 and 2022. New York State Police are pushing for time off for officers who witness traumatic events. More on that from Family Life's Sarah Harnish.
In response to 4 critical high-profile incidents in 3 days, the New York State Troopers Police Benevolent Association worked with members of the Senate and Assembly to write a pair of bills that would provide up to 30 days of paid leave for troopers who witness incidents resulting in death or serious injury. Officers indirectly involved could get 15 days of paid leave if it passes. Sarah Harnish, Family Life News.
All right, thank you, Sarah. A recruitment campaign is underway to attract volunteer firefighters across New York. Michael Smith is a volunteer firefighter in the town of Southport, not far from Elmira.
The camaraderie in the volunteer fire service is wonderful. There are opportunities for jobs, or you can network with people and find new employment opportunities. There are income tax credits from the state of New York that are very favorable.
Chemung County legislator Rodney Strange telling WENY-TV.
We have to remember when we hear those fire sirens go off and those fire trucks, running around the community with their lights on, is that there's people behind those that aren't getting paid, that are just there to serve the community and help the community.
There are currently 80,000 volunteer firefighters in New York. That's down from 120,000 just 20 years ago. PennDOT says it will expand hours of operation at nearly 60 driver's license centers as the deadline approaches to get Real ID compliant. Real ID enforcement begins on Wednesday, May 7th. And if you're looking to move, one Pennsylvania county is offering to pay you to move there. Family Life's Brian Query explains.
Mercer County is along the Ohio border and sits between Pittsburgh and Erie, and it wants to grow. So much so, they are offering to pay people to move there. The county is offering $5,000 for people to move there, with some incentives taking that up to $7,000. Anyone taking up the offer must live 100 miles away. Mercer County already has 100 applicants, with 2 already chosen, and they are looking for a home to move into. Brian Query, Family Life News.
All right, very interesting. Thank you, Brian. Sports is next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob Giannis Antetokounmpo poured in 34 points for the Milwaukee Bucks, but it wasn't enough to take out the Indiana Pacers. Indiana won the game 123-115 to take a 2-0 lead in their best-of-7 series. Also going up 2-0, the Thunder. Oklahoma City got 27 points from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they went on to easily down Memphis 118-99. The Lakers evened up their series with the T-Wolves with a 94-85 victory. Lukas Doncic almost had a triple-double for L.A. He had 31 points, 12 rebounds, and 9 assists. That series now 1-1 as they head to Minneapolis on Friday. On the ice, welcome back Matthew Tkachuk. In his first game in 2 months, Tkachuk scored twice and also dished out a helper to lead the Panthers over the Lightning 6-2. Both Carolina and Toronto went up 2-0 in their respective series. The Canes beat the Devils 3-1. The Leafs won an overtime thriller 3-2 over Ottawa. The Wild even their series with Vegas, skating to a 5-2 win. Baseball. The Mets won their 6th in a row with a 5-1 victory over the Phillies. Francisco Lindor 3 for 5 and drove in a run. The Pirates pounded out 18 hits and easily defeated the Angels 9-3. The Yankees dropped another game to the Guardians 3-2. Ben Rice hit a leadoff home run for New York, but the Yanks couldn't get much else going offensively. They dropped their 3rd game out of their last 4. That is a look at sports.
All right, thank you, Randy Mann. Still to come on the Noon Report. Fleeing the flames in the Garden State, lying in state at the Vatican, and killing koalas in the land down under.
You come from a land down under.
This is a Wednesday edition of the Noon Report right here on Family Life.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. 250 years ago this month on Lexington Green in Massachusetts, the shot heard round the world was fired and the American Revolution began. At dawn, in a common area not far from Boston, a little over 70 colonial militiamen faced down a much larger number of British regular troops. After a brief standoff where an army officer declared, "Throw down your arms, ye villains, ye rebels," the locals refused to disperse, and instead someone fired their weapon. Though to this day no one knows who, 8 Americans were dead or dying when it was all over. And then a few hours later, a force of over 200 redcoats were confronted by nearly 400 angry colonials at North Bridge. And this time it was the Army's turn to retreat. 3 British soldiers died at the bridge, and over the next 12 hours, the colonials, consisting of farmers, shopkeepers, and other ordinary folk, ambushed the fleeing column all the way back to Boston. By evening, the British had lost 73 soldiers, compared to 49 Americans, and even more, by that night, observers could now reasonably speak of 2 sides, the British and the Americans, as 2 distinct groups. The Americans would proclaim their freedom a year later in July of 1776, but would not earn their independence until October the 19th, 1781. The British surrender at Yorktown came 6.5 years after the first blood was shed outside of Boston. In fact, that April morning set into motion events that led to some of the most important and prized words in all of human history. It's what the Declaration of Independence insists. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." These beautiful words, which emerged from warring against England, are now honored alongside older works of the English tradition, such as the Magna Carta of 1215 and the Bill of Rights of 1689. Now that makes sense, given that the American Revolution was not really a rejection of all that had come before. Rather, it was birthed from the same insistence that our most important rights are in fact given by God and cannot be ultimately ignored or rejected by tyrants. Os Guinness has argued for years that the contrast between 1776 and 1789 should provide clarity for our future. Here's Oz, quote, "Does America still have the will and the strength to rise to the demands of the present hour? Or has its success made it complacent and its power made it corrupt? And have America's exertions left it tired and unable to carry the torch of freedom as today's challenges require?" End quote. Despite the various levels of turmoil throughout our history, America has succeeded because, unlike 1789, the Revolution of 1776 was rooted in what is real and true. Though the Founding Fathers were not all devout Christians, they breathed an intellectual air that reflected Christian assumptions about things like divinely ordained human dignity, freedom, moral responsibility, and humanity's propensity for sin and moral weakness. The promise of America depends on these and other principles shaped from the worldview given in Holy Scripture. What's required of us is the patience and the hard work of taking Guinness's challenge seriously in both our personal lives and the public square. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Outside we go next. Kevin Williams.
Here's your Family Life weather forecast for this afternoon. Good deal of sunshine and mild. High temperature 60s in here, 70, but cooler, much cooler, along the shores of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Tonight, partly cloudy, low temps, 40s and low 50s, mild. Tomorrow, limited sunshine, warmer, high temps, 70s near 80. On Friday, some sun, then clouding up with afternoon showers in western New York and western Pennsylvania. High temps, mid-60s to the middle 70s.
All right, Kevin, thank you. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm Bob Price, and a lot to talk about Wednesday, the 23rd of April. The body of Pope Francis will lie in state at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome for a 3-day public viewing. There's a sea of humanity in Rome right now, as well-wishers wait patiently to say goodbye to the 266th Pope to sit on the throne of St. Peter.
How long are you guys going to wait?
Until I have to.
As long as it takes. Yeah? Why?
We're believers.
The Pope made an impact on the world, and I think his message of peace and tolerance is one that we could all subscribe to.
Correspondent Tony Aiello has the latest from the Vatican.
The funeral of the Pope will take place Saturday morning. A burial will follow at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, 2 miles east of the Vatican.
There is a sense of a void that is somehow going to have to be filled, but coupled with that immediately is also the intrigue of what comes next.
The Vatican has yet to confirm the timing of the conclave in which cardinals will gather in the Sistine Chapel to elect a new pope. It is expected to get underway sometime between May 6th and May 12th. Tony Aiello, Rome.
Vice President J.D. Vance admits it was, quote, pretty crazy that his brief encounter with the Pope on Easter Sunday came just hours before his death.
Obviously, when I saw him, I didn't know that he had less than 24 hours still on this earth. I think it was a great blessing. But, you know, I think he saw a lot of people. I think he affected a lot of lives. And I try to just, you know, remember that I was lucky that I got to shake his hand.
Speaking to reporters while traveling in India, Vance acknowledged that Francis disagreed with some of the Trump administration's policies.
He also had a lot of agreements with some of the policies of our administration. I'm not going to soil the man's legacy by talking about politics. I think he was a great Christian pastor, and that's how I choose to remember the Holy Father.
Vance also expressing his confidence in Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who's been under fire of late following reports that he shared detailed military plans in 2 different group chats.
I think he's doing a great job. I think that he's brought a certain spirit back to the Department of Defense. And if you look at our military recruitment numbers, that's, in my view, the best testament to his leadership of the military.
Vance also added that a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia should come soon and will likely involve a territorial swap. A dangerous wildfire quadrupled in size overnight in Ocean County, New Jersey, southern Jersey. Crews are working around the clock hoping to contain the flames.
Southern New Jersey in a major firefight, trying to contain an increasingly dangerous and out-of-control wildfire.
I feel the heat on my face.
The flames burning near several roads in the area. Thick black smoke billowing from Ocean County, New Jersey. The state's Forest Fire Service deploying air tankers and helicopters over a large wildlife management area to help fight the flames from above.
The south flank is really picking up.
While issuing both voluntary and mandatory evacuations.
NBC's Sam Brock. Elon Musk is scaling back from Doge starting next month in order to focus more attention on his struggling electric car company, Tesla. Tesla's net income has plunged more than 70% since the start of the year. California Governor Gavin Newsom suing the Trump White House over those tariffs imposed on the rest of the world. Former California Assemblyman Jack DeVore thinks Newsom needs to focus more on California and less on Washington.
California has been essentially ground zero for the progressive experiment, and it's failed utterly under Gavin Newsom's leadership. It has the highest gasoline costs, the second highest electrical costs. It is losing population. It's hemorrhaging population to other states, especially Texas.
Newsom claims the Trump tariffs are killing California, which, if it were a country, would have the 5th largest economy of any country in the world. And officials in Australia are using helicopters to cull koalas. Correspondent Scott Mayman.
A few months ago, a wildfire destroyed parts of the Budgebim National Park in Victoria, creating a lack of food resource and and overpopulation of koalas.
These animals are in a very compromised state of health and are suffering.
Government official James Todd.
The locals are horrified.
Koala advocate Jess Robertson believes aerial culling is wrong.
They cannot be shot from the air. There is no way they could tell whether a koala is in a poor condition from a helicopter.
Despite calls to end the practice, aerial shooting continues. Scott Mayman, Canberra, Australia.
It was 20 years ago today that a video called Me at the Zoo
here we are in front of the elephants.
became the first video to appear on YouTube.
YouTube is the second largest website on the planet. And that sounds something pretty simple, but you have to imagine how many billions of people are accessing it every day.
Tech analyst Ian Shore. This is the Noon Report on Family Life.
The United States has helped feed and clothe people around the world after disasters and wars. When we do this, we are helping people. But it can also be said that we are exercising what is called soft power. We're going to talk about what this is, soft power, today on Family Life's Inside Out. I'm Martha Manikas Foster, and my guest today is Dr. Peter Meilander. Dr. Meilander is Dean of Religion, Humanities, and Global Studies at Western New York's Houghton University. This is where he is also a professor of political science. Peter, soft power. What's the definition and the political use of soft power? And are all components of soft power economic components?
So soft power is usually contrasted with hard power. We think of hard power as obviously coercive ways of getting other countries to do what we want them to do. And so the most clear, straightforward form of coercion, of course, would be military force. We can attempt to use military power to get countries to do what we want. Mm-hmm. We can also use economic power to get countries to do what we want. So things like tariffs or sanctions would be thought of usually as hard power rather than soft power. But then there are other ways of influencing countries, trying to get them to want the things that we want so that they will do the things we would like without having to attempt to coerce them. So these other ways of trying to get countries to do things that we think are good ideas would be soft power. Talking about it under the label of soft power, sort of using that framework, that is a more recent development. I think of something like after World War II, the Marshall Plan, where the U.S. embarked on this huge program to rebuild Europe, and in particular to rebuild our opponent, Germany, whom we had just defeated. That's an example of economic influence used in ways that were certainly in our interest. It wasn't purely altruistic. We were interested in containing the Soviet Union, but that did a lot of good in the world and won us a lot of goodwill. Building wells, delivering food, assisting with famine relief, refugee services, all of those things could be forms of economic soft power. There are also things that are non-economic. Culture could be a form of soft power. They get this exposure to American culture, which often looks kind of appealing and gets them interested and excited about America. In terms of values, countries can espouse values that have appeal to others elsewhere. And in particular, we would talk about values such as democracy, human rights, liberty, equality. These are things that have a lot of appeal around the world, and people associate them with the United States, or at least have associated them with the United States. And that has been a source of influence for us also.
Peter, many of the goals of soft power, the humanitarian initiatives, they dovetail with the call of Jesus Christ. Matthew 25, the Sermon on the Mount, to feed, to clothe, to treat the stranger as one of us. How do you connect those?
Well, I think that's certainly the case, that there is some nice overlap there. And again, it's not always the case that we are ignoring interests in the Marshall Plan. Of course, we wanted to be sure the Soviet Union was contained, but we could do good at the same time. Right. And so when we think in particular about development initiatives, those are pretty clearly ways in which we are doing good in the world. And it also happens to win us some goodwill. And that's, of course, a nice side benefit. But it certainly is kind of fulfilling that commandment to feed the hungry, clothe the needy, etc.
So if Christians aim to follow Jesus into improving the lives of people in distress, and the government program happens to be helping people who are in distress, the church does a lot of this and should be doing a lot of this, but why not go ahead and join in when the government is doing it as well, because the goal is getting met?
There is certainly a role for the government to play here. Of course, there are church initiatives and charities. These are organizations that do all kinds of good in the world. Christians ought to support those and want them to do things. But government also has a whole range of expertise, of connections, of ability to get into places that are hard to get into. It has opportunities to work with other governments. And people should understand that the U.S. government's foreign aid budget it's less than 1% of the U.S. budget. Yeah. It's a very small percentage of our spending, but it makes a big impact in a lot of places. So I think that we don't have to pit the private charitable or church-based organizations against the government as if it had to be one or the other. There's a role for both of these entities to play.
So as the country diminishes its foreign aid, is that a time for the church to step up more? Are people going to be dying? I know this is kind of a raw question, but what's the consequence?
Yeah. Well, there are real consequences. I mean, if you read the news about the cuts that have been made to USAID, the government funding organization, for example, there are medical clinics in developing countries around the world that have simply had to shut down. Is it in theory true that a church-based organization could step up and fill that gap? Well, yes, of course. That doesn't mean it'll happen, though, and it certainly doesn't mean it'll happen really fast. There are places that don't have access to equipment, that don't have access to medical supplies and these sorts of things. And so I think there's a real cost to human lives and human well-being in places. And I don't think we should underestimate the way in which this does harm the image of the United States around the world. So I think it's worth both wanting to do good in the world and help people, and I think it's also worth being attentive to the ways our efforts to do that or not to do that do affect people's eagerness to work with us and how they think about us.
Mm-hmm. And as people who follow Jesus Christ, there are considerations there I think we should be praying about following Jesus into the difficult places in the world.
That's right.
That is Houghton University political scientist Dr. Peter Mailander speaking with our own Martha Meneikis Foster on today's Inside Out.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. On the midday weather map, we're looking at a friendly area of high pressure over southern Ontario, producing the nice day today. It'll hold firm tonight into tomorrow, but a pair of fronts in the Midwest coming east will increase the risk of showers as we head toward week's end. Our forecast for this afternoon, good deal of sunshine and mild. High temperature 60s in near 70, but cooler, much cooler, along the shores of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Tonight, partly cloudy, low temps, 40s and low 50s, mild. Tomorrow, limited sunshine, warmer, high temps 70s to near 80. On Friday, some sun then clouding up with afternoon showers in western New York and western Pennsylvania. High temps mid-60s to the middle 70s.
I thank you, Kevin. Finally, noon, the stars will be smiling back at us, sort of, early Friday. A rare occurrence of the crescent moon aligning with Saturn and Venus will look exactly like a smiley face emoji. How about that? We should be able to see the crescent moon on its side like a smile with the two planets above it, which will look like the eyeballs. The smiley face emoji in the night sky. Look for it early Friday. And that's our world. The world we live in, Wednesday, April 23rd. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.